Welcome to English Literature for Everyone. I'm your educator Arushi, and today I will start with our poem Birthplace with Buried Stone by Meena Alexander. If you want me to cover any other topics, do let me know in the comments. So let's start with our lesson. Before that, we will discuss who the author is. So Meena Alexander was an Indian poetess whose works often deal with the theme of migration, identity, and memory. She was a polyglot, someone who writes in more than one language. And prior to her demise, she was a distinguished professor in New York. So her poem was written in 2013 and it is a part of a poetry collection that is also called Birthplace with Buried Stone. So don't get confused between these two names, right? It is also the name of the poem and the poetry collection. As I stated, Meena Alexander wrote on Indian diaspora, and it is important to know that while she was born in India, her family moved to Sudan and later she went to US for higher studies. So growing up, she had a sense of nostalgia towards her homeland. In this particular poetry collection, she talks about two things. First is her life or rather the memories of India, right? And the secondly, she talks about her life in Sudan. So the poem that we are covering, it only talks about her memories of India, specifically Allahabad, also known as Prayagraj, where she was born. Okay, now let's start with our poem. In the absence of reliable ghost, I make Arya, cuffing into emptiness, and it came. Here, the poet talks about the reliable ghost. So basically, reliable ghost means reliable memories. Okay, so absence of ghost means poet is trying to recall a time or rather a memory that is not very clear to her. Basically, now her memories of childhood are very fragmented. She cannot remember it very properly. So as she starts talking about recalling her childhood memory, understand from Alexander's point of view that since she moved to Sudan at a very young age, she does not remember it very clearly. Okay. Now here the word Arya means melody or tune. So she says that since she cannot recall or rely on her memories of her early childhood in India, she is struggling with creating a beautiful or a meaningful connection with her past. Okay. Cuffing into emptiness means struggling with something. So, which means that since she's not able to recall her memories, okay, she's not able to remember what her childhood was in a very clear and a vivid way, she's having a hard time establishing a connection with her Indian self. Now, in the next line, she mentions a few of her elements through which she tries to recall her past. A west wind from the plains with its arbitrary arsenal, torn sails from the Ganga river, bits of spurned silk, strips of jute to be fashioned into lines, what words take, sentence and make believe, a lyrical summoning. So she talks about the winds that move across the arbitrary arsenal. Here, the west winds symbolize her unreliable memories that are coming to her in bits and pieces. As I said, that since she's trying to remember a time when she was a child, her memories are fragmented, they are not very clear. Now, she also tries to, recall her memory through random objects like the spun silk or the Ganga river or the jute. In a nutshell, the poet is trying to remember a time of her past, and since she's having difficulty in remembering it very vividly, she's trying to reconstruct it based on certain elements that I've mentioned before. Okay, so the lyrical summoning, the word that she uses at the last, means that she's trying to summon, basically, she's trying to recreate her memories through this poem, through this lyric. Now, in the next stanza, she starts recalling or rather reconstructing her past. Okay, she talks about Allahabad, her birth city, and states how she lived there as a kid. I came to this world in an Allahabad hospital close to smelly cow pasture. Here, Alexander uses sensory imagery to indicate how closely urban and rural parts of the city coexisted. Brought to a barrack with white walls and corrugated tin roof beside a civil aviation training center. In World War II, officers were docketed there. She describes her childhood surrounding where she lived near Civil Aviation Training Center, that is near the Airport Authority of India in Prayagraj. So she describes her house as a white wall with tin roof, okay, which is very, the imagery is very stoic. It is very cold. It is not very homely. Okay. She mentions World War II soldiers, indicating the global political tension during her time. Also, a reference to the past or the history of the city. I heard the twang of propellers, jet pumping hot whirls of air, heaven bent, blessing my first home. Again, she is using auditory image to of propellers and jet, suggesting that technological advancement of the time. Since she lived near the aviation center, as I stated earlier, it is quite natural to hear such a sound. Okay, so while poet does not remember much about her childhood, she remembers that she was very blessed to be at her first home. She was very happy there. Now we move ahead to another memory. Here, poet talks about a couple who have lost their newborn child. Okay, in open doorway, in half darkness, I see a young woman standing. Her breast are swollen with milk. She's transfixed, staring at a man. His hair gleaming with sweat, trousers rolled up, stepping off his bicycle, mustard bloom catches in his shirt. Here she describes the woman and her husband, and she states that breasts are swollen with milk. We understand that she's a new mother, okay, and they are inside a house, and her husband has just now arrived, stepping off his bicycle, okay. I do not know what she says to him or he to her. All that is utterly beyond me. Their infant, once a clot of blood, is spectral still. Behind this family are vessels of brass, dotted with saffron, the trunk of mango tree chopped into bits, ready to be burnt at the household fire. While poet cannot understand this conversation because she is very young when this entire memory happened, yet from the background where she observes mango tree woods, she presumes that it will be used for the child's funeral. So, this memory that the poet talks about is quite sad and somber. Okay, we can also assume that the poet remembers this memory because it had created a deep impact on her life, because that is serious subject, okay, and it is a very sobering reality that often engraves itself in our memories. So it makes sense that she remembers this particular memory. Now, before we come to the final story or the final memory, Alexander talks about the political and social climate of our country that she remembered as a child. Here, she talks about the creation and destruction at the time while using vivid imagery. Okay, through the portal of large chaos, what we can scarcely conceive of in our mind, we rather think of starry nights with biting flames, trapped inside tree trunks, a wellspring of desire, igniting men and God, a lava storm where butterfly dance. Here, the larger chaos means historical event that is taking place in our lives that are beyond our control. We cannot control them, or we cannot try to predict them, and we can only prepare ourselves for it. Just like back in 2020 we had COVID, we could not prepare beforehand, we could not do anything. It's just an event that happened to us, right? We can only try to live with it. So likewise, she says that while she wanted starry nights, okay, it came with biting flames. While she wanted to recall happy memories, she wants to see her childhood as a happy place, but it comes with certain serious aspects that were also happening in the background. While beautiful things exist in our society, they do not eliminate the difficult things that are going in the shadows. Comes bloodletting at the borders, severed tongue right in the capital, the unspeakable hurt of history, so the river Ganga pours into the sea. Bloodletting means making someone bleed. So, bloodletting at borders indicate that geopolitical tension where two countries might fight each other. Okay. Now, the severed tongue indicates the political unrest of a country. Maybe people who were protesting against something were being detained, or the ruling party may have tried to repress those people who spoke against them. Right in the capital further hints towards the socio-political tension that was building in India. The unspeakable hurt of history. So the river Ganga pours into the sea. Poet concludes this topic by stating that despite violent and unpleasant history, the time moves on. Okay, River Ganga pours into the sea, indicating that over time, people learn and continue to live with their lives. People who left India during this tense political climate continue to go on with their lives, and so did the people who stayed in India. Now, Alexander comes to her final memory of India, where she describes a different state of women's life. Okay. In Aftermath, the elements of vocal awakening, crud, spittle, snot, and menstrual blistering, also infant steps, a child's hunger, a woman's rage, at the entrance to a kitchen, her hand picking up vegetable shaving, chicken bones, gold tossed from an ancestral keep. Now, vocal awakening means when a child is born, they cry very loudly. So, it starts off with a woman's birth. She grows into a woman, and as she goes through some very different yet very normal bodily functions like getting your periods, she also talks about a woman's rage that keeps on building as she grows up against society. Okay, here, poet also talks about the daily routine that a person does to sustain themselves. Gold indicates ancestral wealth that they have inherited from their families as a form of heirloom or jewelry that reminds them of their ancestors. Okay, so here she's first talking about a woman's journey through her life and how she, develops certain rage towards society due to the unfair treatment. And then, secondly, she talks about the importance of family heirloom and artifacts that keep us connected to our heritage. Now, coming to the final lines, all this flows into me as a molten memory mixed with syllable of sweat, gashed syntax, strands of bust bone in river sand, beside buried stone of Saraswati coop, well of mystic sky water where swans dip their throats and come out dreaming. So, all the memories that we have discussed in the poem are present inside poet's mind as a molten memory. Molten means irregular patterns. Okay, so it's like a zigzag puzzle. All the memories are present in her mind as a zigzag puzzle. Along with those memories, she also has experiences we can see through the words like syllable of sweats, gashed syntax. Then she reminds us of human mortality by mentioning bust bone in river. She also mentions Saraswati Koop, a temple in Prayagraj of, and it is a temple of goddess Saraswati. Okay. Here she talks about how when person spiritually connects with their culture, they get this sense of awakening. Okay. So in this poem, she talks about her childhood memories, and its emotional significance that she has as an adult. She also uses a lot of visual imagery to convey her ideas and experiences. In this poem, she has included some very basic experiences like watching airplane or some very tragic events too. In the end, she ties all of these experiences together with her spiritual and cultural awakening. Now let's discuss themes of this poem. At first, we have memory. Poet connects memory with cultural identity, stating that the people who move out of their country or homeland often rely on their past to feel connected. Also, through her memories, we get to understand what her life was in India back in 1950s or 60s. The next theme is of self-discovery. So in the poem, as she dwells into her past and she recalls her memory and tries to gain a sense of herself. By connecting with her roots, she discovers and understands herself. Okay. Through this poem, we also get to see how migrants often carry a guilt and longing for their motherland. Finally, uh, we come to our last theme, which is the cultural identity. So, cultural identity is formed when people of a particular culture or a nation have shared experience. For example, a very basic example would be Republic Day celebration in India. If you have studied in Indian schools and colleges, you would have similar memory and experience of that day. Those experience in a way unite us. Now, people who live outside India, NRIs, who have moved away from their homeland at a very young age or have not studied in colleges or schools here, they will not get these references or these sense of belonging. They will often feel out of place or disconnected. So here poet tries to recreate a connection with her homeland by recalling her memories. Okay, now with this we come to an end. If you like this explanation, please comment down below, and for more such content subscribe to my channel. Thank you.